This is Nasha Kasha, a Ukrainian almanac, 28 minutes of stories for everyone about Ukrainian life. Nasha Kasha is heard on 19 campus and community radio stations from Newfoundland to British Columbia. I'm your reporter, Stefan Andrusyak. This is episode 229. Much of it was first heard in February of 2017. Courage. It's the willingness to confront agony or pain. In Ukrainian, the words are «відвага, хоробрість, сміливість».
Хто ми з тобою в цьому світі? Хто ти мені, а я тобі? Вдихаєм ніжність із повітря, як діти граємо в любов, в зеніті милості і млості. В темряві нараз, що ж ти, закривши свої очі, лишаєш серце на показ. Хто, як не ти, спалить мости, хто ж побудує знов? Навчи мене жити, як ти, щоб не кипіла кров. Хто, як не ти, спалить мости, хто ж побудує знов? Навчи мене жити, як ти, щоб не кипіла моя кров.
This is Christina Solovey with Who Will Burn the Bridges and Who Will Build Them Back Up Again? Хто як не ти? The Circle of Courage portrays four of our basic growth needs: belonging, mastery, independence, and generosity. Just think how good it feels belonging to a group, mastering an area of expertise, feeling confident enough to act independently at times, and developing a spirit of generosity. And how they all come together when you have to dig deep in life and take a stand. Let me tell you about the courage of Sviatoslav Karavansky. Karavansky was a prominent Ukrainian Soviet-era dissident. He had been twice sent to concentration camps, imprisoned there for a total of 31 years. Karavansky died on December 17, 2016, at a hospital in Baltimore, Maryland. What follows is from the December 25th, 2016 edition of Svoboda, the Ukrainian Weekly. Born December 24th, 1920 in Odessa, Ukraine, Sviatoslav Karavansky studied at a local university at the same time as he participated in the activities of student groups linked to the underground Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. He was arrested in 1944, and he was given a 25-year sentence in Siberian hard labor camps. After being released under the post-Stalinist amnesty in 1960, Mr. Karavansky returned to Odessa. There, for the next several years, he scraped by, doing translations of classical world authors, writing articles about linguistic issues for newspapers, and at one point he worked as a computer technician. He became very active in efforts to revive the use of the Ukrainian language, and he wrote 2 books aimed at guarding the Ukrainian language against government efforts to bring it closer to Russian. He was alarmed at the pace with which Ukrainian was being pushed out of the schools in Ukraine. Karavansky's articles were published in underground media, and this led to his arrest again in 1965 and to the revocation, without a court trial, of his 1960 release from prison. Karavansky continued to expose violations of human rights in the USSR. He wrote petitions dealing with discrimination against Jews, the mass World War II deportation of Chechens and the Crimean Tatars, and the cruel punishment inflicted on participants of the Ukrainian and Baltic nations' liberations movements. He succeeded in having some of those articles smuggled out of prison and published in the West. In 1970, he was made to stand trial again, and he was handed an additional 8-year sentence. His wife, Dr. Nina Strakota, was likewise an inmate of the Soviet prison system. She had been arrested for protesting her husband's incarceration. Dr. Strakota died in 1998.
Воля Україні – це наша мета. Звільніть мороза, тюремна Москва. Звільніть Караванського і Чорновола. Звільніть Шухевича, звільніть Кандибу. Дайте Україні свободу, не нищіть нашу мову. Звільніть Караванського і Чорновола, звільніть Шухевича, звільніть Кандибу.
That was the song Freedom by Rushnechok from their album Rushnechok Volume 4. The Rushnechok song Volya, or Freedom for Ukraine, was released in 1976. The words demand the release of leading dissidents at that time, political prisoners, and they demand freedom for Ukraine. On the list, if you'll notice, was Karavansky, along with Moroz, Chornovil, Shukhevich, Kandeba. This was a remarkable period, even if it was a gray period in Ukraine's history. For as recently as 1968, Soviet troops crushed a budding democracy movement in Czechoslovakia. Still, they could not suppress free thinkers who dared to voice their dissent there and in Ukraine. It is this period I'm looking to explore for this broadcast. I'm in Montreal, taking the metro to meet with someone who met most of those key figures in Ukraine at the time, Professor of History, Dr. Roman Serbin.
Hey, hi, Romane.
Там стояв, перейшов попри тебе, я так думав, що то ти це так давно не бачив, що...
Dr. Serbin meets me inside the metro station, and outside we walk along slushy sidewalks for blocks. Roman first began teaching history here in 1975.
Université du Québec.
Університет du Québec à Montréal. Quebecский університет в Монреалі.
He still checks for mail, even though he retired in 2002.
Добре.
We find a quiet office, and Roman tells me the story of how he, a newly hired professor, convinced this university to send him to Moscow for a history conference, even though he had no paper to present. He would go on to carry dissident books published abroad back to some of their authors in Ukraine.
In 1970, I was fortunate in being able to go to the 13th International Conference, Historical Conference in Moscow. This was a gathering of at least 1,000 historians from around the world.
You'd already finished your thesis, your PhD?
No, I was still working on that. As a matter of fact, I had, as I said, I had joined UQAM, and I got a year off to work on my thesis, and that's how I was able to go.
Okay, so here you are, born in Ukraine, grown up in the Ukrainian culture in Montreal. This tinderbox is happening. The Czechs are shut down, repressed. 1970, you go to Moscow. How did people in the city look at that?
Well, yeah, when I came back, some people said that Serbin was brainwashed, but but not very many.
But that took courage. I mean, that took courage. You're going to Moscow.
No, there's absolutely no courage. No courage. Because of '68, the Soviets would not do anything stupid to worsen their reputation in '70. So I felt very, very comfortable. I had no fear whatsoever. Well, let's say maybe not that much no fear, because I had some literature with me. I had Juba, Internationalism or Russification, and I have several other little books that about half a dozen small books, and the suitcase not very heavy. Okay, so I brought these with me, and then when I was in Moscow,
did they open your suitcase?
Of course. Well, of course. Well, no, not when I was flying in, but when I left them in the hotel, obviously they went through everything. I mean, that's. I was quite conscious of that fact. But as I said, I could defend myself on that, and I knew that they were not going to raise any stink while I'm there, at a conference. There was one session at that conference which was devoted to Slavic countries, Slavic peoples, and so on. And there were papers from touching on, of course, Russia, on Poland, on all Slavic peoples, except Ukrainians, Belarusians, and Macedonians. So I decided that I would say something. So I put my name up for discussion. And discussion, you only had 10 minutes to present your thing. So it would be the next day. So the evening before that, I took out Dzuba's book. I went over and I picked up some of the information that I needed from that book concerning Ukrainians, issues in Ukraine. And I made a little speech, during those 10 minutes. And I said, if you don't mind, please allow me to speak in Ukrainian. I finished that. I didn't have any opposition, nothing. I heard a few people clap, applause. It turned out to be Poles. I spoke with them later, and they said, well, don't think that you're going to change anything. I said, well, I don't think I want to change anything, but I think it was interesting to do.
The conference now over, he convinced the Russian authorities at that conference to let him go to Kyiv.
In Kyiv, I met with Juba. I discussed his book with him.
On this trip that you just talked about,
Yes.
So you met with Juba?
I met with Juba.
So the guy's book, you're carrying it. You brought it into the country.
Okay. My connection in Kyiv was Zina Franco, the granddaughter of the poet Ivan Franko. During that week that I stayed in Kyiv, I met with her every day, and through her, I met all the dissidents that I met in Kyiv. And then one of the dissidents was Bogdan Horing, and through Bogdan Horing, I met another slew of dissidents in Lviv. And we met at Ivan Hell's apartment. Ivan Hell was arrested at that time, but his wife was there and his daughter was there. And 15 intellectuals who came. Chernovil was one of them. These were all very, it was mind-boggling. I mean, I never expected all these things. With Zina Franco, I met her two sons, and we were in a bus one day, and the bus was full, and we're standing near the door and so on. All of a sudden, the bus stops, and just before the bus starts again, these two guys grab me and push me out of the bus, and they jump out, and the bus closes the door and they leave. And I said, well, what are you doing? He said, well, they were KGB guys with us, and this is one way we got away from them. And there was no courage on my part, believe me.
But it sounds like there was courage on their part.
On their part, yes. Yes, and this is what happened. This was 1970, and in 72, this young guy from Belgium goes, and he gets arrested, and they find on him Karavansky's book. And Karavansky's book is the Словник ремів української мови. And that book is used as excuse for, arresting other people and so on.
So it's a dictionary of the Ukrainian language?
It's a dictionary of the end of words. Poets can use it when they need somebody with that kind of an ending for the word, you see. But that was just an excuse. I mean, they obviously needed somebody. There was a lot of literature going back and forth. When I was in Kyiv, I met Sverskiuk. Sverskiuk gave me, this was in the park in front of the University of Kyiv. Sverskiuk gave me some papers, and I said, "What is this?" And he says, "Well, these are corrections to my book that was published in the West, Sobor v Reshtovanі." And I brought it with me. It wasn't confiscated. I was not checked, and so on.
Did you put those corrections into action?
Yeah, I gave it to Dr. Antonovich, and he sent it out to whatever people, and then they.
And Sobor means what? What does the book title mean?
Sobor is the a church.
It sounds like there was a tremendous deal of generosity on their part, and also a sense of belonging as a group.
Well, this was the elite, not only intellectual elite, but it was a moral elite, a nationally conscious elite of Ukraine. These people were dedicated. These people, some of them had already purged many years, like Bogdan Horin came out, had come out from the Gulag, and he told me, well, I spent a lot of hours with Bogdan Horin. He described his life, the general's son, Shukhevich, with Yuri Shukhevich. We went to a restaurant, we had a meal, and so on, and he told me his life story. These people were all ready for whatever happens.
So but how were they ready? Why were they ready?
Well,
you're coming from Canada. You're about to leave. They've just been let out of from sentences or the Gulag, and they're sitting and they're talking with someone who could get them into trouble.
Well, they realized that, but they had to keep, connections with the West.
They must have felt free enough or strong enough somehow or masterful enough of their topic area that they somehow surfed that fear.
I'm not a psychologist, so I can't penetrate into their psyche, but it just felt that these people, when they were in their environment, even as I said in Kyiv, where there were two KGB guys sitting there, and they told me that they're KGB guys. They pointed me to a table. They weren't sitting with us. They're not further back. Yet they spoke freely. At that meeting that I mentioned in Lviv, Chernovil, I had an idea of Chernovil because I read his book, and he was a journalist. And to me, a journalist is somebody who has two ears and only one mouth, and who listens much more than he talks. Well, Chernovil was just the other way around. He dominated the meeting. He was speaking all the time.
You never met Karavansky?
I never met Karavansky, no. I met his wife much later in Montreal in '83 at a conference that we had on the Great Famine, but I never met him, no.
With what you know and what you've lived through and what you've studied, do you have any ideas about Ukraine today and where it's going in the future?
Yes, I think that Ukraine is still a post-genocidal society, what May said. But I interpreted it a little bit differently, that post-genocidal society. Each genocide is different. Each genocide is unique. Each genocide has certain common features with others. But
he's calling it a post-genocidal. What does that mean?
And the post-genocidal is part of that. In other words, the genocide in Ukraine is not just the killing, the physical destruction of the peasantry. That is a wrong approach to the study of Ukrainian genocide. Ukrainian genocide, the purpose of the genocide, Ukrainian genocide, was, like Lemkin said, the destruction of the Ukrainian nation. Nation is not just the physical people.
And how does this affect where we are today and the future?
In that the genocide, the physical destruction, for the most part, ended in the 30s, with the famine, but the destruction of the Ukrainian culture, language, spirit, all these other elements were not. And I think that the result of it is Ukraine of today.
Nasha Kasha comes to you from Radio Western 94.9 FM on the campus of Western University in London, Ontario, Canada. We're heard on CHMR 93.5 FM in St. John's, Newfoundland, on CKDU 88.1 FM in Halifax, on Local 107.3 FM in St. John, New Brunswick, on CJAS Radio 93.5 FM in Saint Augustine, Quebec, on CJLO 1690 AM in Montreal, on CFRC 101.9 FM in Kingston, on CFMU 93.3 FM in Hamilton, on CKMS 102.7 FM in Kitchener-Waterloo, on CJAM 99.1 FM in Windsor and Detroit, on CKLU 96.7 FM in Sudbury, on CILU 102.7 FM in Thunder Bay, on 101.5 UMFM in Winnipeg, on CJTR 91.3 FM in Regina, on CFMQ 98.1 FM in Hudson Bay, Saskatchewan, on CFBX 92.5 FM in Kamloops, on CIVL 101.7 FM in Abbotsford, on CJSF 90.1 FM in Vancouver, and on CHLY 101.7 FM in Nanaimo, British Columbia.
Я думаю, що корупція.
There are two great dangers for Ukraine, says Roman. The first, Russia. The second, corruption. And corruption feeds the threat that is Russia.
Якщо б не було тої корупції в Україні сьогодні, то Росія б не мала скільки нагоди використовувати ту корупцію в Україні. But diaspora must be very critical of Ukrainian corruption, of Ukrainian authorities, of the Ukrainian oligarchs.
Roman believes that rather than educating what he would call good Ukrainians, leaders there and in the West should educate good citizens. It would also show inclusion for peoples of all kinds of backgrounds living in Ukraine.
Тут треба, значить, відродження моральності в Україні. Це дуже важливо. І тут має велике поле до попису, власне, інтелігенція, церкви, академії і так далі. Інтелігенція мусить повести це відродження.
Так як інтелігенція колись і між ними дисиденти брали першинство і провадили у дуже тяжких часах, так і ти кажеш, що інтелектуали мусять тепер взятися.
Я дуже люблю тепер вживати вислів Шевченка.
In closing, Roman quotes poet Taras Shevchenko.
І чужого навчайтесь, свого не цурайтесь.
Learn from others, do not forget your own. But he also adds to that.
Але є друге речення, яке, на мою думку, продовжує першу і заключує першу. Це є, якщо б ви вчились так, як треба, то й мудрість би була своя.
We need to consider what we learn from others, he says. Add to what we already know and use that knowledge for an even better tomorrow.
І з того зробити нову мудрість для майбутнього.
Щиро дякую.
Прошу.
I spoke with Dr. Sirbin to update this story in mid-October of 2020. The professor emeritus was in fine voice, working on a paper, he said, about the very same dissidents he met in the 1970s and told us about in this story. The Oxford Canadian Dictionary defines dissident, the word could be an adjective or a noun. It means disagreeing, especially with an established government system. It comes from the Latin root dissidere, which is to disagree. Many dissidents go on to earn the respect of people around the world, while others end up leading the very countries that, under a different regime, tormented them. Writer and Tiananmen survivor Liu Xiaobo co-authored a peace manifesto in China, was arrested, earned the Nobel Peace Prize, died while in prison. Soviet-era pro-democracy playwright and essayist Václav Havel, the New York Times called him, quote, a shy yet resilient, unfailingly polite but dogged man who articulated the power of the powerless. Mr. Havel spent 5 years in and out of communist prisons, lived for 2 decades under close secret police surveillance, and he endured. Havel would become Czechoslovakia's last president before it became the Czech Republic, and then he became the Czech Republic's first president. I believe that the world is a better place now, because both of these men were among us. Earlier in the program you heard Angels Are Near, which was written and performed by Evan Wish, and this is Oksana Mucha and Je ne sais pas.
Je ne sais pas, je vous verrai, oh non. Mais c'est peut-être pas la fête. Et l'essentiel que quelque part très loin, il y a quelqu'un comme le soif infatigable. Je prendrai pas le bonheur de quelqu'un, le reflet de l'écho ne volerai pas là-bas. J'ai pensé à vous, je sais que vous existez. Mon âme est à l'aube de celle-là.
I wish to gratefully acknowledge that Nasha Kasha is supported in part by the Shevchenko Foundation and by the Ukrainian Credit Union. Nasha Kasha is also widely available as a podcast. I'm your reporter Stefan Andrusiak, back in a week, God willing. До милої зустрічі. За тиждень часу, дорогі слухачі.
Je prendrai pas le bonheur de quelqu'un, le reflet de l'écho ne volerai pas là-bas. J'ai pensé à vous, je sais que vous existez. Mon âme est à l'aube de celle-là. J'ai pensé à vous, je sais que vous existez. Mon âme est à l'aube de celle-là.